Okay, welcome to an emergency live stream. Colin, huge news this morning. I don't know, but you're on the Pacific Coast, so you probably woke up in a flurry and a hurry to everything that's happening in Bitcoin mining, AI, HPC, and data centers. But for us over here on the East Coast, we got this news first thing like 8:30 a.m. ET. The wires were buzzing. This one we've all been waiting for after the Wall Street Journal broke a scoop that Coreweave and Core Scientific were once again in talks after failed talks about a year ago. And this time it went through, and there's an all stock deal to acquire Core Scientific. First thoughts on this?
Yeah, it seems like Coreweave kind of came out on top on this one, I think, which is funny to say because when Core Scientific and Coreweave were early on in their business relationship, like you said, Coreweave made an offer to buy Core Scientific. I believe it was in the ballpark of about $1 billion. It didn't get anywhere though. We didn't actually have details for it, so I don't know if it was being proposed as all cash or all stock. But with the current structure of the deal, Coreweave is going to be paying out based on current prices, right? And this could definitely change. At current prices, about $20, 40 cents per share. But it's an all stock deal. So under the terms of the agreement, Core Scientific stockholders will receive 0.1235 shares, like basically 1/8 of Coreweave Class A common stock for each share of Core Scientific that they hold. And this nets out to about $9 billion when you take into account all of the exercisable and outstanding shares of Core Scientific. Yeah, so like first thoughts on this, I do think that this shows that if it's an all stock deal, this is a big win for Coreweave because basically what they can do is they can issue new shares and they will recoup, their OPEX into the future that they were going to have to spend on these Core Scientific contracts, which was something like 10 billion over 12 years, which nets out to about 833 million annualized over the next 12 years of these contract life cycles. So Coreweave doesn't have to spend any cash on this. They're going to just issue stock to the Core Scientific stockholders, and they will be able to shore up that revenue, which would be, shore up those payments, which would be, it's quite expensive if you actually look at the lifetime of those deals, and they won't have to pay that anymore. And the other thing that the all stock agreement kind of shows me too, and just the purchasing price, which is lower than a lot of analysts had it pinned at. I believe, is it Cantor Fitzgerald? We covered this in the newsletter a week back, saying that they could see $30 per share.
Yeah.
So, you're taking about a third of the haircut off of that. That was way too optimistic, obviously. But what this kind of shows to me is that Core Scientific really was bent on making a deal here. They wanted to make sure that they could get this wrapped up, strike while the iron is hot, so to speak. And the last thing that I will say about it in terms of in terms of what this shows about where Coreweave's head is, if you really look at this, I kind of read this as they're really only valuing the HPC infrastructure and the data centers that they are going to be retrofitting. So there's 590 megawatts that are under the original or the amended Coreweave deals. There were a number of deals that Core Scientific and Coreweave struck, and there are about, according to their press release, there's 840 megawatts in total of potential HPC pipeline. So there's that 590, and then you have another 250 on top of that in terms of what could be potentially rolled out for HPC in the future for Coreweave and Core Scientific's data centers. Then you have 500 megawatts of Bitcoin mining. And the way I read this is that I don't think they're valuing that at all, or at least they're not putting any sort of stock into that being valuable for their business into the future. So, and if you break it down on a per megawatt basis in terms of what they're almost paying $6 million per megawatt for the whole thing. And if you look at estimates for how much one of these retrofits of a Bitcoin mine for an HPC data center, what it costs per megawatt, that's roughly within the ballpark of some numbers that we've crunched from, some numbers that we've covered from JP Morgan and some other investment banks. JP Morgan, in one of its reports last year, estimated that it will cost anywhere from 5 to 7 million per megawatt to retrofit a Bitcoin mine into an AI and HPC data center. And so like Coreweave is basically smack dab in the middle of that purchasing price, of that figure with this purchasing price. So all in all, I think that it is a win-win for everyone, but you can definitely see in terms of what's going on with their respective stock prices that investors clearly see this as CoreWeave kind of coming out on top, and they're a little bit disappointed with the terms on Core Scientific side.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think the number that jumped to me as someone who's, maybe not as deep in the numbers as you are is the $9 per share is kind of like what this was valued at. Um, Wait, the 9 billion, sorry.
Yep.
The $20 per share or thereabouts. Um, but since then, we have seen the charts kind of get spooked. So I'm going to pull those up right now. We're going to go to TradingView and look at first Core Scientific, which had quite the whipsaw. And it got a nice little BART pattern here. I'm not a trader, but that's what they call it. And you see like it ripped upwards pre-announcement. They noted in the press release, Core Scientific noted that the exchange rate or the trade here from the $20 per share versus the pre-announcement was a 66% gain or so. You see that it's trading like just around $12 here. And then we got to a high over the weekend of around $18 per share. And then this morning saw like a pretty precipitous drop. It's recovering a little bit and we're, floating around $15 per share. On the Coreweave side of things, I mean, I don't think it moved the needle too much. So here's the monthly. I'll move to the 5-day. Definitely some like action this morning a little bit. But
yeah, it's down about 4%, but Core Sci is down 16.
Yeah, and like of course the relative market caps of these companies are vastly different. Core Scientific, I don't have the market caps in front of me, but it's not over $5 billion market cap, and then Coreweave is well over 60 billion, I think, at this time. So pulling those numbers from memory. So those things came to mind just to think of off the top. I want to go back to this Core Scientific chart and just talk about it a little bit more. I think people who are invested in the stock, full disclosure, I do own some Core stock. This was like a pretty great outcome. But the sell-off this morning was a little surprising for people who are paying attention to it, and they're wondering why. If you go back to the Twitter days, right, when Elon decided like, hey, I'm going to buy Twitter, and he publicly posted his buy price, it was like $52 or something like that. And you saw an immediate arb, right, where like that offer was made and the market knew that offer was going to be bona fide and went through the whole court system. And so like that entire time you could kind of sell at that price. Now we have on the books what the valuation is for this all-in stock deal. And we see it tank a bunch. So of course, the next question is, why is that happening? And luckily we have some armchair Twitter analysts to guide us this morning. So I'll throw up this first one from Kevin Mack, who we were showing on the screen actually when we started the live stream by accident. And I'll just read off what he said. Deal came out to 2040 all stock, a bit worse than expected, but not too far off. I expect an all stock deal higher and or with some price protection. This suggests a couple things. One, Core's desire to get a deal done was very high. Two, Coreweave is being tighter with the purse strings. I'd say the past Coreweave deals were on the generous side. If you look at the November options market, you can build a synthetic short position on Coreweave, which prices the stock at about 115. That's basically, not exactly, a term short borrow of Coreweave's November for 115, as opposed to paying spot borrow rates and shorting at 155. Another way to say this is that the forward price for Coreweave expected by the market is 115. This is what arbitrageurs care about, and the price values Core's at about 420 per share. This is assuming there's a zero chance that the deal breaks. The three arbitrage factors that will now drive the Core stock price are percent chance deal succeeds, expected borrow rate of Coreweave to deal closure, expected stock price of Coreweave. I'll probably be playing it, but likely won't be tweeting about it. Ended up with a small profit on my shares purchased at $16, having trimmed some at 17, 18, and closing the rest at 15-ish this morning. So that was just one perspective I wanted to throw up on this sort of deal. Like typically for the mining pod, like obviously we've leaned more into sort of the stock coverage as of late because it's been an interesting thing. And I think a lot of the market has been moving that way. But I wanted to note this as we kind of saw an interesting pattern that I would not have expected. Like from my smooth brain over here, I would have been like, okay, like all in stock deal, valuing $20, should have gone to $20 this morning. But there's other things in the water that can drag the price other directions. I'll throw it over to you for your take, and I know you have a tweet you want to go through as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's now a tug of war to see who can get the best deal on converting their core shares into Coreweave shares, right? So I am not nearly financially versed enough to comment on what Kevin is saying here about the synthetic shorts and things like that. But it will be kind of, I think, the story going forward with Core Scientific is seeing like what does the market actually value it at as we enter the next phase of these of finalizing this deal, which is expected to close in Q4 of this year. So the other thing that I would say, and I don't have a tweet. There, I was looking at some of Penny Ether's analysis, and we can throw it up. Give Penny a shout out as we like to do on this podcast. The one thing that Penny noted, and one thing that I just keep coming back to with this in his tweet was that it seems, and I quote from Penny's tweet, but it seems to kill the deal. Aspirations Cores was pitching with little to show for it. In exchange, they offered exposure to Coreweave's business, but I can already buy that. And Penny is looking at this obviously from strictly an investor perspective, as he should, and that's how every investor who is looking to arbitrage this deal right now is looking at it. But the point of this for at least the Core Scientific team is this is a juicy exit for a company that was nearly dead 2 years ago, right? And this is probably going to be the best acquisition deal and exit that they find. Another thing that Penny points out in that post, which I do think is notable, is both CoreWeave and Core Scientific in their end of year calls made notes that they are trying to diversify their revenue streams. So for Core Scientific on the HPC side, they were looking to find another tenant that would match the revenue rate of CoreWeave. On CoreWeave side, they were saying that they were looking for contracts from the big tech companies of the world like Microsoft to kind of shore up, or excuse me, to match some of the revenue they are bringing in on their HPC side of the business, because I believe Microsoft at the end of 2024 accounted for some crazy percentage of the revenue. It was like nearly 2/3 or over 2/3. And as we've seen with CoreWeave too, one of the things they noted in that end of the year call is that they were looking for opportunities outside of Core Scientific in terms of finding, kind of these cheap retrofits to continue to expand their footprint. And they've done that. They have signed deals with Applied Digital and Galaxy. And we have not seen the same success from Core Scientific in terms of finding new tenants for some of the other HPC build outs that they had proposed in their most recent disclosures. So all that being said, we're kind of going back to the original point at the beginning of this, is that CoreWeave clearly had more leverage in this talk. And we're seeing that in the terms that they have finalized here. Now, obviously, all of this assumes that none of this will fall apart and that the deal will go through as announced. I think there's probably a good chance of that. It'd be kind of strange, I think, for this to fall apart, because I really do think if you're a Core Scientific insider, Core Scientific employee, or one of the early investors, this is still a really good deal. You're getting a buyout all stock deal with one of the most valuable tech stocks of this year, right? In terms of IPOing earlier this year with CoreWeave. I mean, CoreWeave's market cap is like something like in the ballpark of 100 billion, I think. Let's
yeah, we keep chatting about it, but no, let's have that up.
Yeah, 76.35 billion.
It was right between both of our guesses. I was saying 60 billion. You're saying
well, it was 100 billion earlier in June, but it's corrected from its peak.
Which is to interject here, that's like one thing that Penny has on the bottom of his piece that is interesting here, right? It's an all stock deal. So like, let's say that you hold your Core Scientific bag. You're like, hey, I like these guys. I like what happens. And then you roll that into CoreWeave and you are awarded a bunch of shares in the company. Now you're just exposed to that risk basket, which is a different risk basket than holding a Bitcoin mining / AI data infrastructure stock, right? So there is more upside, but it becomes a totally different game. And I like the way that Penny puts it, and you repeated him there, that like there's other options on the market for what to purchase there. So at the same time, there's other options in the Bitcoin mining / AI HPC data center game, Galaxy, Iron, others. So I don't have much more to add to that. We have the chart up here because I think it's interesting. The things I will note for listeners is we actually have a podcast coming out tomorrow talking about Coreweave. So it's like kind of good timing, but also bad timing because we couldn't include this information. Basically just goes through how Coreweave works from a lot of different angles, from the economics of it, the tech stack, things like that. So check that out in the mining pod. That'll be out first thing tomorrow morning. That will not include information about the Core Scientific deal. RIP to us for recording that on a Friday. When this news came out on a Monday, but that's part of the news biz. And then we are hopefully going to have the Core Scientific team on the podcast at some point. Had them on in the past, obviously. So hopefully we can get them on, talk through this deal and why they went through with it. Yeah, a lot of people are saying this morning that like maybe you got the worst end of the deal, but I will just say like, and I think you agree with me on this, Colin, like they went from bankruptcy not too long ago to one of the hottest stocks out there and now being acquired. So like, I think a round of applause is due for them. And I think it's a pretty cool success story.
100%. It's the Cinderella story of Bitcoin mining stocks. I mean, I don't own any cores, so this is just coming from what I've observed over the last few years. Like you said, Will, it's a huge comeback story. This was a company that was dying, and the new management came in, Adam Sullivan and others, and completely reshaped the business and completely charted a new trajectory that no one said was possible at the time. And now they're looking at a good payday because of it. And so I understand people saying that this is disappointing because there was all of this hype going into it and they thought that there was going to be a higher acquisition price. But I mean, I was talking to people in 2022 who were saying that Core Scientific is going to emerge from bankruptcy and then just plunge back into it. Like that was not the consensus view, but a lot of people believed that. And now we're talking about them getting a $9 billion payout from one of the larger neo cloud companies, if not the largest neo cloud company out there. So yeah, hats off to all of the Core Scientific folks. And we will eagerly be awaiting the press release to say that this is finalized, because it would be an interesting chapter to close in this new brave new world of Bitcoin miners becoming cloud companies. But that's it for me. I don't really have anything else to add.
I just remembered one thing before we close out is that I listened to the call announcement from Coreweave this morning, and I'd encourage people to go check that out. It was interesting. They did note that they do plan on divesting, or probably divesting, of their Bitcoin mining sites that don't make sense for AI HPC. So you'll have a few new sites pop up on the market. And what I've heard from feet on the ground is it's really, really hard to find good Bitcoin mining sites right now. There's been a lot of there's just like not a ton of assets out there that make sense for Bitcoin mining at the moment. Like the US market's been pretty saturated. And I do hear a lot of brokers say they have stuff, but I think they're kind of, paid to say that. So I think that the fact that you have Coreweave being like, hey, we're probably going to sell these sites. I'm not sure which of I think core size like 5-ish sites. Not sure which ones are going to divest, but I'm interested to see who of the bigger Bitcoin miners out there are going to go pick those up. It could be one of the publicly listed guys, but it could be like some of the new entrants like the Fortitudes. GDA is looking around at purchasing some. So, and then also NYDIG has been very, very active in purchasing. So there will probably be a bunch of calls about those sites with Coreweave should they choose to actually divest. Let's close out there. Thank you for listening. Go subscribe to the newsletter, subscribe to us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, and go check out our podcast, The Mining Pod, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, elsewhere. We'll be talking about Coreweave tomorrow on the show, and we'll post this as well. Check you guys later.